Hello, everybody. This is Peter. Welcome to our March 17th weekly radio address, post-Z-Day. I hope everyone did well and had a good time doing it over the course of the Z-Day weekend, if you will. I've been getting some wonderful feedback from all over the place. In fact, I've been inundated with people that are fascinated with questions, with new people, and it's wonderful. Things are still trickling in as far as actual events. I'm curious to see what type of events were happening. I know we were advocating YouTube posts. By the way, before I forget, anyone out there that has posted their event in a recorded fashion, in other words, please send them to media@thezeitgeistmovement.com so we can make a post-Z-Day event archive, which we're working on right now, so people can get a sense of what's been going on around the world. From what I've seen thus far, it's been very impressive to see the independence, but yet the in-concert expression that was occurring from Slovenia to Australia. It's great. Press. We've been looking for press out there. Anyone sees press, let us know. Obviously, New York, we had basically a monsoon in New York, and CBS, which we got back in touch with, said they couldn't make it because of how bad the weather was in New York. It was bad, but it was really unfortunate that it happened when it did, because we did need more press coverage. As of now, very little press coverage has come out for New York, which is the way it goes, but that doesn't mean it's the end of the world or anything. I think this event really documents a year of progress. In 1 year, with over 230 chapters, 380,000 members, we have organizational capacities which have developed very well and are going to continue to develop. Considering how young everything is, I was just extremely impressed with what's been happening and how the events were undertaken based on the feedback that I've gotten and what I've seen through media that's been posted. But anyone out there that has any regional news, say, I don't know, anything that was happening in your region in Europe that was covered, please don't hesitate to email it to me or post them. We need to make an archive of media in general, news media, in other words, so people can understand that we're not some flimsy fly-by-night organization. Last year we had the New York Times, which was very good, at least in representation, at least for acknowledgement. Excuse me, it wasn't the greatest article, but nevertheless, that is important for press. So there was a Huffington Post contribution that was actually quite well done. If anyone wants to punch that up, they did well of overall expressing their interpretation of what they'd experienced at the New York event. And even though the webcast was a little buggy at times, I do hope everyone was able to follow. And I am going to be editing out the entire event within the next few days, I hope. My life has been railroaded up until this period, so I have to pick up the pieces of my own existence over the course of the next few days. But I do hope to get this up there for everybody and put it into a DVD downloadable form and everything else. That's it. Again, I want to express my appreciation for everyone that worked so hard on their events, and it's just really mind-blowing when you see what people are doing all over the world now. And again, this is our infancy. Track the history of social movements, and you'll see how rare what we're doing is, how difficult what we're doing is, and to see the response and to see the cohesion that is emerging, both independently and as a global group organization, is quite profound, at least in my opinion. And I hope others can see it that way as well. This is going to be a slightly shorter radio broadcast. I'm kind of in a permanent form of exhaustion, but I'm snapping back. But I'm going to go through the questions that were submitted on the forum, and I just want to see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, just to talk about things that we're going to be doing since this accent, if you will, of Zeitgeist Day, almost a 1-year anniversary in a sense. There's the media project, as we've been talking about for a while. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but there was a fallout with the individual that was working on it. He was unable to complete it. So we have our own developers coming forward to finish this media project website, which is, again, I'm very excited about, and I'm very, very sorry that it has not happened up until now. It's been a very long time. But nevertheless, that is on the list of priorities. Apart from that, there are many other additions to the website that we're trying to deal with. I'm trying to get the knowledge database together, which consists of all of the questions I've answered over the course of the past year, to have a better frame of reference, a better reference facility, if you will, so people can search these questions and not ask me the same questions over and over again. Other than that, we have a Zeitgeist University project, which is being worked on now, which is an attempt to make as a subsection of the chapters. We will have a university network, which is gauged entirely towards university groups, obviously. They are, again, a subset of the chapters. That's something that's in the works. A new website will be developed for that. Of course, From Earth to Venus, developers are continuing to work with that. That is a more difficult project, but I'm hoping to get the bare bones of that finally up. There are people that are considering this very diligently. In fact, I want to call out to all developers, and I'm going to send an email probably to everybody, that we need to start getting more developers together on TeamSpeak to have meetings about all of these rather complex problems. And of course, updating the website. Nothing is set in stone. I know there's been people complaining about the way the website might be slow or a certain functionality. We are always open to input, and of course, since we rely on the internet so much, it's very important that our general infrastructure is solid. We'll probably be moving the server to a better server very soon. Nevertheless, feel free to have your input, and excuse me, my point was, if you're a developer, you work in programming, pay attention to an email that's going to be sent out very soon, and it'll have links in it as to where to go to become more active in our programming and development team. They've already been meeting in TeamSpeak for quite a while, but we need more people, and we need to organize an infrastructure for it to deal with the translations and everything else that we've been doing for so long. So, let me jump into your questions. And by the way, Jock and Roxanne, we're very happy with everything as well, as far as New York and the general response. They've been getting lots of they've been getting lots of contact from many different third parties from around the world, and hopefully it will help a lot with their world tour, which again is very long and extensive, and really wonderful to have kind of floating around there over the course of the next 6 or 7 months. So the only place to go is up, and I see tremendous prospects for the next year. All right, I'll stop rambling and jump into your questions and see how many I can slam through here. Hey, Peter, number one. Hey, Peter, was the movement Jacques Fresco's idea or a proposition to you? And if not, might it be a good idea to ask Jacques for any possible tips on making the design of the movement more efficient and effective? Well, no, the movement was essentially, they had been talking about getting people together to support the direction. The movement was triggered by almost inadvertently, at the end of Zeitgeist Addendum, where I was almost an experiment to see if I could actually get people to come together with this direction, and amazingly, it's worked pretty well. Jacques has always reflected his knowledge on organizing anything towards me. So yes, he always is talking to me about just about anything in regards to that. So there's plenty of feedback that comes from everybody, and Jacques, of course, is no exception. Number two. Is it preferable that the transition to a resource-based economy occur in a functioning monetary system for obvious reasons, including the greater capacity to actually transition, allowing us to non-violently wean ourselves out, and the added benefit of not needing to wait for a, open quote, doomsday scenario, close quote? With that in mind, is it probable that the current generation of college students and young entrepreneurs who are mired in debt and have made great sacrifices to be successful in the monetary system will naturally take issue with this, not to mention the great many older people who've done the same? How will the movement in a resource-based global economy address the great emotional baggage that will be inherent in what is essentially giving up everything one has worked so hard for? That's a great value system question, and it goes in multiple angles. What do you do with somebody? How do you engage somebody that has been working in a particular discipline or been operating in a particular belief system for so long that something comes along in the environment and completely pulls the rug out from under them? That is just an adaptation question, and unfortunately, what depicts our values really is the environment and nothing more. So what I mean by that is people are going to have to learn to adapt, because as I mentioned before, we're going to transition into something else regardless. I can't see, if anyone watched my lecture, Social Pathology, that I worked very, very hard on for the Z-Day event, you'll see that there are so many attributes that are falling in line that really are nails in the coffin of the system. It's not going to happen in 1 year. It might not even happen in 5 or 10 years, because they keep the propensity is still to maintain the system. So as long as that propensity is there, all it is just going to create social distortions that materialize and then become accepted as normal. New social distortions materialize, accepted as normal. That's how we adjust and we justify the system. More and more prison, more and more police, So, point being is that we're going to move into something else, I think, and it's just a matter of time. And we have to adjust our values accordingly. So in people that are hung up on their particular contributions in this stage, what's reinforced in society today, they are going to have to they're going to have to snap out of it, because the society will not reinforce what they have been learning, what they have been doing. It's traditional cultural programming is the language that I used in the Zeitgeist Day presentation. So, I think I understand your question, generally speaking. We don't want to wait for the doomsday scenario. We want to use people in a greater capacity, by all means. Hopefully people that are studying, disciplines that actually have a social relevance, programming, engineering, city planning, human study. Those that are in those fields are obviously very useful. And on the other side, you have people that work in Wall Street and finance. You have corporation orientations. These are becoming less and less relevant, if not utterly meaningless, as time moves on, and people understand how important the resources of the planet are, as opposed to how important money is. So, excuse my mild tangent, but the baggage, all I can say is that we have to do our best to make people understand that it's a transition, and they're moving out of something that, regardless of how hard they work for it, is in fact unsustainable and very problematic on multiple levels, into a sustainable social orientation, if you will, and it will be for the betterment of everyone. So that's a rather disjunct way of answering that question. So I hope that helps. I'm going to keep going kind of quickly here. I hope I understood your question thoroughly. Yeah, I think I answered that. Number 3, hey, Peter, do you think it might be a good idea to make a chapter's suggestions section to help orient the chapters, such as doing bi-weekly meetings, going to college campuses and protests and other events to hand out flyers and educate people, coming up with creative ways to get publicity media, as well as suggestions of things to do during chapter meetings, such as listening to the weekly radio addresses, orienting new members, and watching informative documentaries? Yes, chapter suggestions. I'm trying to find a way to have a suggestion platform for just about everything. We do learn from each other, and so it's very important we have a system of interaction, which of course we have in the forum, and everyone's paying attention to various issues, various elements like that, but we could make it a little bit more specific. I think that's a good idea. Obviously, in the communications team, which we're going to start working on as well, I should have talked about that at the top of the show, the teams are going to gain more prominence as we sort of inch into this phase 2 area that I've talked about. And we do need to get more organization, and chapter suggestions is a great place to start as far as general contributions. So I'm going to make a note on that in regards to the communications team. That's how we grow. But your general suggestions are great. It doesn't take me to tell people what to do at this stage as far as how to get the word out. I can give my suggestions. But you just engage people with media. You engage people in any way that you possibly can. Just use your mind. College campuses, of course. Yes, we're going to be working with that at the Zeitgeist University Network. So all these things are slowly coming into place. But it's very important people also think independently. And that's an aside, but I just want to throw that out there. Number 4, I don't see a successful, open quote, hard transition, close quote, happening, so I will concentrate my efforts on creating economic systems that could be used for a smooth transition in one country, which will then serve as an example against capitalism. Would you see an organization like this in line with the goals of the Zeitgeist Movement? Well, in part. There are lots of organizations that want to work within the system and try to consider a smooth transition. And I think I've commented many times on how problematic that is. That's why I have the quote, the Gandhi quote, "Become the change you want to see in the world." Granted, that's gestural. You have to play the game to a certain degree. It's impossible to function otherwise. The thing is, I would have to disagree with you. I think a hard transition, meaning an abrupt transition, it might be much more probable than a smooth transition. I think as time moves forward, if what the trends indicate is correct, that the bottom will fall out to an extent where something will be put in place that's rather abrupt. The question is, what will be put in place when the bottom falls out even more so? Will it be fascism, or will it be actually a system that's sustainable? Fascism would be the propensity, I think you would agree. I would hope for a smooth transition, but again, it takes biosocial pressures, it takes problems. If people are conditioned to be comfortable with their current degree of depravity, then they're just going to look the other way. They're not going to understand the relevance of moving into something new. I would God, I would love to see a smooth transition, but the very nature of breakdown isn't smooth. So all I can say is that an organization that you described, sure, is it in line to a certain degree. We want the transition one way or another. Any suggestions people have to make it more smooth, by all means, let's hear it. I've talked about this in general, things you can do, things that the Obama administration could have done to help the problems that are occurring now that aren't done because of how powerful the corporate lobby is and the so-called free market. Because any type of state interaction with business, of course, is against the free market. So, and everyone throws up their hands, and even though the state is equally as corrupt, I'm just pointing out that there's been an ideological barrier set up that works for the advantage of corporations. It's this mantra of the free market, and if anything interferes and something goes wrong, they always blame the state. You'll notice that the market system has always blamed the state for all problems. And I'm not saying the state is good. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying there's this knee-jerk thing that's been implemented that is a myth, essentially, that if the market system's allowed to be on its own devices alone, then everything will be okay, and it's always the state that has problems and interferes and messes things up. That is, of course, the old traditional ideology that's put out there. That is partially true, but that is not what the real problem is. So I hope that makes sense. The market system itself is the parasitic mechanism. A little bit of a side. Number 5, hi Peter, I think we're in need of a major, frequently updated blog for the movement. I know that there is a Venus Project blog, but there are a couple of issues with this. It's not updated enough. The content is specific only to the Venus Project, not the movement. The content, strict guidelines to maintain the Venus Project image. However, there is no reason why using this as our main blog can't still be an option if it was okay with Jacques and Roxanne. Either way, what I suggest is that we have a centralized blog that publicizes all the latest news, interesting videos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the blog, blogs are just variations in a way of forums. I think we have enough of that. I mean, I don't see any problem with having more things like that. We could make our own blog. It's kind of moot with me. I think you could utilize the forum just as equally as you could utilize a blog. So, I can bring that up. I'll make a note to see if that's really something to work towards. But I mean, there's plenty of things posted. I mean, we're trying to update news more frequently with the movement and things that you talk about, interesting articles, news. We're trying to make that more apparent. And in fact, I might make another section on the news section which has other specific attributes as far as global issues, such as our social breakdown section in the forum. I think there's so many good news things that get buried as time goes forward that we're documenting. It might be good to simply archive that information and put them on a blog, if you will, a frame of reference for people that come to the movement, and they can immediately go and see all the problems that are emerging around the world and just document it based on news source releases. I could see how that would have merit. So I'll give that some thought. Number 6. Hi, Peter. How much has this website's projects actually helped Jacques in the Venus Project? The project section seems relatively unused, and I was wondering if in the past you've had some good results from it. Well, the project section is, the team orientations are in development, and we're just trying to get people together as far as sharing this direction. And then there'll be more action taken as we move forward and become more organized. So, as far as helping Jacques and the Venus Project, it's helping the awareness of a resource-based economy. And I think we've done pretty well. I mean, obviously the communication strategies are fairly self-evident. It's pretty obvious, and people are doing lots of the same things that are applicable, so just passing out flyers or showing movies, etc. Doesn't, again, as I mentioned before, it doesn't take a lot of ingenuity to figure out ways to do this. So that's also why I haven't pushed the communications team that much, because it is relatively self-evident. But nevertheless, we're working on that. And here's the second part of your question. How far through Phase 2 and others is Jacques? Are you in contact regularly enough with him to update the condition of the phases? It would be pretty useful to know. Jacques doesn't think about it in the phases of the movement as I do. That's my culmination, even though he's probably readily aware of it since it's utterly obvious. I would refrain from using that language of these phases. I do it for organizational purposes. I wouldn't worry about it. We're not through Phase 2. We're inching into the Phase 2 as we describe it, with more projects and development. Yeah, so I'm going to leave it at that. Number 7, Dear Peter, how can we as a society expect governments, banks, and corporations to carry out the advancement and well-being of society as a whole over their own advancement and well-being, since the system of competition favors singular dominance over collaborative equality? Well, that's a wonderful question. I assume you meant that almost as rhetorical, because if you've listened to anything I've said, then you know that we simply cannot expect governments and corporations and banks. In fact, I think I made that statement in my lecture, denoting how it's a sad reality, but we can no longer trust the banks, the corporations, and any government on this planet because of the inherent mechanisms. We have to become the immune system of this social disease that has emerged and start to actively suppress it and get rid of it. And unfortunately, as much as, and I'm not dismissing anything, but I have no faith in government legislation, and of course banks or corporations. The intents are always adverse to the human condition at this stage. Number 8. Do you think it might be possible to design a Earth ship or independent community with the goals of technological underpinnings of the Venus Project as its basis, the idea being that these places would be service centers to serve larger nearby communities, research facilities to develop and test out needed automation and city systems, central hubs designed to be the center of the fully developed future city, which would absorb the surrounding population. This would allow for the process of learning to live in a resource-based economy as it grows, make it a viral progression in many places at once, all connected under the same design structure. That's an interesting statement, interesting idea. I would say that the only issue is where's the money going to come from to do that? Because, I mean, if you're doing something really low-fi, such as the Earth ships, you can get away with it to a certain degree, as we've talked about before. And I don't dismiss any of these other sustainability movements, and especially the ones that are off the grid, as you all know. It's just have to remember the context and how to fit the social imperative into this. Because as we know, the Venus Project cities really aren't a resource-based economy. They're just ideas. They are important in sustainability, and they're exquisite in their efficiency and the role that they're there to function for. The Earth ships and other independent communities, they would be a little bit different because they are only sustainable to more of a lo-fi degree. They're not made for large populations, though, again, people will argue that. But in the end, they're not systems. They can't be systems because we need technology to help with the larger overarching attributes of modern civilization, such as resource management and all the things that we've talked about. So I'm trying to, yes, I guess these communities, I certainly favor these communities. Anything that's separate from what we're doing now is beneficial. But making the bridge from those to the Venus Project, I'm trying to think about how that can happen. It's possible. I'm seriously thinking right now how that would work, and a blank comes to my mind because there's still that quantum leap at the end. You wouldn't want to create all the infrastructure for these things only to move out of them eventually into something that was of what we describe as a functional resource-based economy. I see it as a possible transition, though. And, yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. That's something to think about. I would have to really sit down and think about how that would work as far as a transition. But I see your point, and I think generally speaking, yes, that is operational to a certain degree, as long as the end goal is maintained. Anything to move out of the system into the new system, whatever's in between, will obviously be positive, even if it's only temporary. So anyway, sorry I can't answer that question more distinctly. It's really something I have to think about more so. Number 9, you said that we are not a charity, which made me jump about a bit, and although I suppose you might consider this a play with words, this playing with words, aren't we an educational charity? Sure, we're an educational charity. That's fair enough. The typical definition, the typical semantic use of charity in our culture has to do with more of a monetary relationship in food and housing and donation, so you get my point. But you are right. Number 10, I think that many of us are unable to retain and accurately recite the vast amounts of information examples needed to express our ideas on the spot. You have also expressed your concern for the movement being misrepresented by those with the same inability to correctly relay the information. I feel that a solution for this is urgent. Okay, I'm not going to read all of this. It's very long. Basically, yes, that's why we put out the materials that we do. That's why the lectures, or at least the one lecture, I still have to convert the other ones. I apologize. It's a real nightmare to convert those files. But nevertheless, we have lots of material out there, and it's up to the people to learn well enough to represent them. So I hope people will get out there and really diligently learn about the information. And of course, we're going to have people misrepresent at times. That is just the nature of this. People hear a little bit about it and then they project into it, and we all know how that goes. There's plenty of people that have started chapters, even state chapters, that seem to understand, but as time moves forward, they begin to not understand. I had one individual that left and just called me a communist, and we're all just a bunch of communists, and that was their frame of reference. They really couldn't see beyond that, and it's unfortunate. But this is the game that has to be played. But again, it's only been a year, and I think the work that's been done in about a year has been phenomenal. So, number 11, phenomenal in the sense that people are understanding. In other words, we're not losing this. There's misinterpretations will continue. That's just a part of the process of understanding the information and dealing with people's cultural values. Number 11, hello Peter, do you agree with the following? Society must learn a better way to judge things than only by associations. And what do you have to say about that? Society must learn a better way to judge things than only by associations. That's a very interesting statement. I would say I'd stop the second half and say society must learn a better way to judge things. Yes, I agree with that point. We want to judge things based on relevant information in a bottom-up approach. We need as much information as possible so we can make accurate decisions and arrive at accurate decisions. But the second half of your sentence is, then only by associations. Unfortunately, I might have fall victim to the semantic gremlin here. Associations are everything, though. You really can't. The human mind is a pattern recognition system, and that's the way we work. It's through comparing and understanding and defining through associations. So I think I'm not sure what you mean. We're definitely always going to have associative properties. Can't even mentally picture any other type of. All words are associated to physical referent. Well, not always physical, but I think that's the most important point. Referent. Physical referent is the most important thing. Any association that isn't based on a physical referent tends to be problematic. Number 11. Peter, at minute 42, in the interview with you on December 5th, you said, well, hold on a second, I think my thing got truncated here. Yes, that became truncated. Oopsie. Sorry, that question got truncated. Let me see if I remember what it said. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was about a comment that I made about nationalizing corporations or something along those lines when I was doing an interview. Actually, that's December 5th, though. I'm sorry. I have to go back and look. I'll make a note to answer that one next week because I lost it. Sorry, everybody. I'm a little tired here. All right, here we go. No, here we go. I got it. Society, when we start to educate people, apparently I said this, when we start to educate people on natural processes of the environment, science, technology, and resource conservation, and when people can gauge society on a professional level, if you will, they do so on things that actually matter. That would be cataclysmic. That would be unbelievable to see people doing stuff that actually has a relevance. Closed quote. Okay, that was a statement I think I made in that mini documentary that Charles made of me. The person continues, could you please comment on which are the more important endeavors, careers, jobs, or works that you believe are necessary for the transition to the Zeitgeist Movement Venus Project vision? What should we be learning and working on to achieve this vision? As I said before, the main issues are things that have an actual feedback to social development, that have a social relevance. City planning, anything having to do with advanced material sciences. Molecular biology is a huge one, even though it's a complex field. Physics, science, mathematics, structural engineering, energy issues. There's a whole list of things that are very obvious that actually return something to society, that do something. And my point in the documentary was very simple, that if people didn't have the propensity to engage in occupations that didn't have a return, such as in the financial industry, and they worked on something tangible and they applied their mental power and their information on something tangible, you'd see many, many Jacques Fresco's out there. You'd see many, many Albert Einsteins out there. You'd see many Da Vinci's out there. We just have to create a unique enough environment and allow people to flourish on their own accord without all the impositions that we see today with the monetary-based specialization system, which really robs people of their creativity, forcing them into specific predefined slots over and over and over again, generation after generation. So, number 13, hi Peter, I'm a graphic designer. I was wondering what you think about a uniform template for each and every Zeitgeist chapter. You have said that you like Wikipedia, how they function. They too have uniformity. Well, the uniform template is sort of what we have for the state chapters. I actually appreciate people's creative alterations. It's unique. People that are running the sites of course, have a novel attribute to them, as we all do, and I think that can be represented in the work that they're doing and the expression that they're doing to the website. So, there is a template. I mean, anyone can download our template, but I like to see people modify it. I hope that makes sense. I hope I answered your question. Number 14, I would like to know specifically how children would receive education in a resource-based economy. It seems to me that education would not take place in some sort of institution like today, but would be more independent. In the future, will children be mostly interacting with a database whilst also taking part in practical experiments? Would children's education be partly supervised and guided by the parents of the child? If not, would there be any human supervision? The educational question is one I can't answer because we really don't know, but you can extrapolate what the best methods would certainly be. It's not really good to I wouldn't frame this as a child being taught by, say, a machine or anything like that, or a child without any supervision. I think that just as I think everything will depend a lot on computer processing in the future, education will be no different, and there'll be an interaction with technology when children learn anything. You can make a lot of wonderful virtual environments that really make points, really drive points home that you couldn't do without technology. I think that teachers and guidance will still exist, but I think there'll be profound changes overall. I think the testing phenomenon will diminish, and it'll be more of an interaction, hands-on interaction with the things that people learn. And I think the focus will shift as well. I think there'll be more of a focus on value orientations in the younger years of life, and then gets more technically specific as children grow. So that's really Jacques talked about this. I think we've answered that. We've answered that question many times. I'm trying to give answers that haven't been given before. As of right now, I wouldn't worry too much about that, even though I appreciate your question. Education in the future will be based on relevant information. And, for example, in college, again, going back to what serves society, it's so important, and it will enable so much freedom, too. It's not, people say, well, that sounds kind of cold. You want to restrict people to just sciences, even though I don't think science is cold whatsoever. I think when you get into the system, when you understand the system, you'll see that the amount of time that would be necessary to contribute would be so much less than what people do today, which will enable much more free time for art and creative interests to flourish. It's just getting the problems taken care of. I know this is a bit of an aside, but we have to resolve the problems. People object in many different ways in regard to cultural nuances with this, and they seem to miss the fundamental point. And even though I know people like to ask a lot of questions that are abstract and they just like to hear the answers to and that are good questions, but I just want to reiterate and remind everyone that we need to focus on what is actually required to make the changes needed, what is required to operate society, what is needed first, rather than nitpick about certain issues. And again, this isn't the question, but I just want to throw this out there. Rather than nitpick and complain about certain attributes that we don't know enough about yet, or things that people can't understand. People say, well, what if everyone wants to have a house on the beach, as though everyone would? Well, that is a unique problem. It is, but it's not really a problem in any other extent than it being a cultural problem. But those ask those questions, it almost seems as though they are willing to dismiss everything if they don't get the answer that they want for these minute, tiny questions. And I'm sure many of you out there that have engaged people will come up with things like this. And they miss the central point, the central necessity to move into a resource-based economy by absolute necessity. I say that again, I reiterate that because that is what it is. This isn't some creative idea to just change the world for the better. I firmly believe that this is the only method, whether it's the Venus Project per se. You have to have a system based on resources, a resource-based economy. And otherwise, you're setting yourself up for propensities, that will only lead to problems if you're not aware of what you're actually doing with the environment, which is what we're doing now. We're totally decoupled, as I've said numerous times. So, anyway, that's a good question. I'm sorry for my tangent. Number 15. Knowing the current state of world affairs and how the system operates and creates so much unneeded stress in the world, how do you keep positive and happy? I know you once stated you looked at the world as if it was a TV show, but was hoping you could expand on this a little. I know I often get down when times hit hard, and knowing how much better things could be, it's a big downer. Okay. And second question to this was, how is Zeitgeist moving forward, coming along, and when will it be released? Well, you have to have a sort of a passive. This might sound strange to some of you, but I look at what I'm doing in a very passive sense. I discovered a long time ago that if the more intense you are, the more emotionally absorbed you become, the more things start to fall apart. I think that works in many different areas. Everyone needs to relax a little bit, or just in general, actually, in almost every application. And it's not that you're not taking something seriously. It's that you don't let yourself become obsessed and fanatic about it. We all have waves like that. But there's so many things that we have to contend with. I look at this in the sense of, okay, I know this is very difficult. I know what needs to be communicated. I do lots of work. But in the back of my mind, I also say to myself, this is the most ambitious thing that has probably ever been done. And I have to make sure I maintain a realism in the sense that I can't have expectations that this is going to happen in 5 years. In fact, I don't have really any expectations. And that's a very complex point, but the more you expect something, the more it inhibits you. That doesn't mean I don't have an interest to move in the direction. Obviously I do. But I don't let myself become clouded by this nervous, emotional necessity to get immediate satisfaction. There are a lot of people out there that really want to see something now. They don't understand the larger picture. They don't understand the complexity. And all I have to say is you have to pull back and you have to say to yourself, okay, we're doing this, but I'm not obsessed about it. I'm passive. I'm interested, obviously, but I'm not going to let myself get all hung up and bent out of shape because of the current state of affairs and knowing, of course, what we can do. Granted, it's easier said than done. Of course, I have my moments where I walk down the street in New York and all I can see is perpetual inefficiency, destruction, and waste bleeding out of every angle of the social structure, both physiologically in the buildings to just the mentality of the people walking around and going to their jobs. Believe me, it can be tough, but you just have to maintain the balance. There's an old thing that you can also do is you have to monitor yourself with a form of a witness. There's kind of this third-party attribute, There's a third-party thing that I do, and please don't think I'm crazy, but nevertheless, if you kind of step beside yourself and you find yourself getting emotional, or you find yourself getting pissed off about something, all you have to do is recognize that you're doing that in the third-party sense, almost like you're standing next to yourself, looking at yourself, witnessing yourself becoming upset. And the moment you do that, you can stop those knee-jerk issues. The only problem is remembering to step out and witness what you're doing so you can break the emotional obsession before you go too far. I hope that doesn't sound too bizarre, but that does something that works for me. Granted, I'm not perfect. I'll get irritated and do the childish things just like anybody else at times, but I think I do better than most. Anyway, I'll stop that tangent. Regarding your second question, how is Zeitgeist moving forward? That's my focus as of now. It's going to be a very difficult number of months. I'm not sure about October. I'm going to try to do October, but we'll see what happens. I have so much work I have to do with that, and Zeitgeist Day really stifled everything I was doing, even though a lot of that information that I presented is going to be in the new film. but we'll see how it goes. I'm certainly looking forward to it. It's going to be a very complex production process. It's a much larger undertaking than the prior two films, so I'll definitely keep everyone posted on that. And I apologize, by the way, that there isn't a trailer yet. There were some animators that were supposed to provide me with some materials that didn't meet my deadline, and I wasn't able to show a trailer for the Z-Day event, which is my initial intent, if anyone remembers that. But I do hope to have a trailer out within, I don't know, a couple of weeks. That's my goal. Okay, number 16. Hi, Peter. I posted this before, but it was too long. I will synthesize. What would you say about a forum moderation system inherently based on the principles of the resource-based economy to some extent? In summary, a report button with automated polls and voting coming from active members. Okay, and I don't have the larger explanation here. Well, look, I don't really know. I'd have to go back and review what you're saying. The forum stuff, I'm not going to answer that question in any extensive length here because I really don't need to talk about technical issues like that on the radio show. But we did use certain automation things that were shunned eventually by members, such as these karma feedback systems. It was a natural way to kind of gauge people that were being problematic or were trolls or what have you, versus people that contribute. People didn't like that. They felt it was too judgmental, so we took that away. At least overall, we took it away visually. But it's always an ongoing pursuit to figure out the best way, the most automated way to deal with things like forum moderation and stuff like that. And I'm certainly interested in hearing more about it. If you want, whoever wrote that, I'll go back and look. If you want to email me your suggestions, please do, and I can forward it on to our administrators, and we can review it. Number 17. Hi, Peter. I'm hearing an increasing amount of skepticism towards the movement, calling it a sham or a cult, or that's in it for money. I guess they mean in it for money. Frequent points that are brought up are the fact that the Venus Project is selling their property as well as T-shirts, coffee mugs, autographed photos. While I think it's ridiculous that people think the lifelong work of Jacques is some scheme to profit from selling T-shirts, it is nevertheless an issue constantly used to denounce and harass members of the movement. Is there anything you would recommend saying to these people that could possibly change their perspective? It seems that every time the movement even touches money, these people are all over it. Well, welcome to my world. Why do you think I don't push anything? Because that was the initial problem when I started everything. Is how do you deal with this and you keep the monetary system out of it? Venus Project has to do what they have to do. Everyone needs to understand that they have no real source of income at all. Roxanne supported the Venus Project through her commercial work for years. The bottom has fallen out, or did fall out, with the housing market still falling out in Florida where they live. And the work that she did, she has no work. This is what they have to do. This is what everyone has to do. They have to sell something, or they have to sell themselves. So, I can see the cynicism. All you have to do is remind people that, well, what would you suggest for your own survival? You can't. The double standard is very insulting, and I completely agree. I ignore these debates at this stage because it's so juvenile and idiotic that if that's all that they can think in regards to the quality of the information, I mean, why don't you send them the 4 lectures that I've done for free that are available for DVD download? The last one will be, of course, very soon, and ask them, well, these aren't for sale. I mean, I'm not selling. None of the information that we've put out with the movement is for sale at all. I mean, I got really irritated the other day. There's someone on eBay that was selling our orientation DVD in a package. See, every time you put in a position that you do things for free, you're in a position of abuse, for one. And that's an aside. I'm not even going to go on that tangent. All of my work has been so hideously abused, trying to have it $5 DVDs just generated. Obviously, people appreciate it, but simultaneously, people buy them and they resell them for a lot more money. It's very problematic just from an insolence standpoint. I don't even care about the money issue. So anyway, someone says, "Oh, they're just in it for money." Why don't you explain to them that there's no evidence to show that they do anything other than to sell things for their survival? Having a T-shirt for sale for the movement, well, people tend to like T-shirts, and I have to do something to pay the administrative and website bills. As I mentioned before, I'm already running at a deficit as it is. Let me see if I answered all your questions. As far as it being a cult or a sham, well, they obviously pay no attention. Cults don't have large bodies of work. Cults exist as small versions of religion that get together and have lip service to something and don't do anything. Obviously, we're in an educational period, but we have a goal that we want to move toward. It can't be a cult. If anyone says it's a cult, say cults don't have goals. They really don't. Cults have this floaty propensity to pontificate on certain things, and they don't move anywhere. So a functional resource-based economy where we want to move into the structure has no resemblance of a cult. We're not even really philosophical. We're actually anti-philosophical in the movement. We want to base everything on tangible relationships to the environment and physical reference. So all the attributes that would say that it's cultish or whatever, those are so easy to blow off. And generally speaking, don't even waste your time on people that have nothing better than to say things like that. Seriously, I get a lot of people that they find one website and they get obsessed about it because it's just a website, and they feed into it. Don't feed into any of the groups out there that are against what we're doing, that have websites. Just don't feed into it. If someone comes to the forum post and posts these things, ignore it, and we'll just get rid of it. If you see a website and it's against everything, don't post contrary things. Just ignore it, because the more you feed into it, the more you antagonize, the more you try to reason, the more interest is generated, the more people get on their high horse, and the more dogmatic, believe me, the more dogmatic things become. You're not going to turn people around that have such a blind disposition at this point. They do it for many other personal reasons. If someone didn't like the religious section of my first film, and there's all sorts of crazy people out there that just are, and I say that very literally, there are some absolute batshit crazy people out there I get emails from that have posted websites that I'm terrified of. And people wonder why I don't talk about my last name, because these people scare the shit out of me. I'm not kidding. I'm not hesitant to point that out. I've had my share of run-ins with this extreme psychosis that this society perpetuates, and there's always a degree of protectionism, but nevertheless, that's an aside. When it comes to these people that have nothing better to do than to call us a sham, a cult, or just in for money, ignore them and move on. Number 18, what are your plans on enhancing the decentralization of the movement? Enhancing the decentralization of the movement. Well, the movement is inherently decentralized based on its chapter orientation, but there always is a global attribute to it. In other words, I think eventually we'll have a council. I mean, we have the international team meetings that we do, which there's one today, by the way, at 6 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Gilbert will be running the international meeting for those that want to come. The issue of decentralization, I'm going to have to kind of interpret into what you're saying. We are a series of groups that are all across the planet with a common goal, a shared value, and we have different tactics we utilize in different areas. So it's decentralized in that sense. There's a great deal of independence, but it's also unified in the global structure. The people, obviously, I am of a position where I am influential of the global nature of things, and we want to have global projects. So the decentralization means, to me, that say some group gets in trouble. I don't know. I don't even want to throw out possible problems that can emerge with governments that might come down on one group. Because it's decentralized, other groups can react. Say I was taken out tomorrow. Well, that shouldn't mean anything to the movement. People should be able to pick up the pieces. It needs to be holographic. I think rather than use the word decentralized, it's holographic in the sense that it's equally distributed, if you will, and any one part can pick up the whole if necessary. So if the zeitgeistmovement.com goes down, we have all the other hosted sites that are still there where information can go to. So it's not the end of the world, even though we could probably do with some more backup systems, and I'm still continuing to work on that as far as mirroring things. In fact, I'm going to make a note about that right now. So anyway, number 19, do you agree with me that this movement probably has involved many people with great ideas on social design, which would develop the Venus Project idea further, maybe even change parts of it radically? Well, Jacques will be the first to tell you that the Venus Project, the resource-based economy, is simply just a certain string and almost an infinite-long thread. That didn't make any sense. It's a notch in an infinite-long thread of growth, and people eventually, and he's actually stated this, that the ideas of the resource-based economy, the city system specifically, will eventually be outdated as well, will be considered primitive to people in the future as more understanding comes forward about how to best sustain the human society. So change is always going to occur. As far as this stage, contributions to it only add to it. In other words, I've yet to read anything that someone has come up with that's in line with our ideas that really changes anything. I mean, there might be changes in certain technical phenomenon, but as far as the actual social aspect, as far as why the mechanisms are in place, such as, the idea of not having this burden property relationship, this controlled restriction. Now, people might disagree with that, but they don't understand the rationale as to why that's so important for sustainability and resource preservation and management. I'm not going to go on that tangent because I'm going to run out of time here, but nevertheless, I hope I answered that question. And I think there was actually two parts to this. Well, here, number 20. Do you agree with me that there is a need of enhancing the feeling of openness for the development of the basic curriculum of the movement? Enhancing the feeling of openness for the development of the basic curriculum of this movement. Enhancing the feeling of openness. That's a very interesting question. I'm not sure. Enhancing the feeling of openness. I think we're pretty open as it is. I don't even know what more we could do to make it more open. Obviously, information contributions materialize in a kind of disjunct causality because we don't have many contributors at this stage. I know I still want to do a newsletter. I want to get writers together that are dedicated, that can find articles of relevance and can create articles. There's so much stuff that needs to happen to get information, to get projects going, to get information flowing, and to just get this information out there. In other words, excuse me, I'm very tired today. I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing me say that. I'm like a broken record, right? So as far as enhancing the feeling of openness, I think if you want to send me some suggestions, I'd have to have more clarity on what you're actually asking. I mean, the curriculum of the movement is based on external information. It's all out there, and it's constantly being fortified and reinforced as scientific progress continues. Just as HP now has the sensor systems for ubiquitous monitoring of the planetary resources, seismic data specifically, to the advent of nanotechnology, all these things come into play. So I hope that relates to your question. Number 21, as I see it, there are some major problems with the resource-based economy that haven't been addressed yet. So here it goes. As we all know, it is impossible to eliminate scarcity on all kinds of resources, and we also know that there is a human propensity to strive for rare resources. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We live in a finite world, yes, and it's pivotal to our understanding as a species in a collaborative way to realize that we can create an abundance of certain things. We have control over certain things while we have a less amount of control at this stage over other things. So obviously, not everyone can have an estate that's 7 miles in diameter. Not everyone can have a house with 700 rooms. These are so blatantly obvious and offensive, too, when people bring these up as contrary issues. You make the statement, there's a human propensity to strive for rare resources. I have no idea what that even means. Are you saying that there's a natural attribute hardwired into the human being to strive for things that are scarce? I don't think so. The only reason that we strive for rare resources, if I understand your question or your point, is because they always have monetary value, high monetary value. The more rare things are, the more value they have. I think people won't care about rarity in the future. I think it'll become a value to overcome scarcity and rarity at all times. I have paintings and things like that that friends of mine have done, and I've thought about, does it really matter to have the original of this? Does it really matter to have the one of a kind? It really doesn't. It's the information that matters. I would, if just like Jacques made the point, having a guy that has a collection of Picassos, why would he want to restrict everyone from sharing that? If he did, well, that's a value system conflict. You could easily synthesize almost the exact texture of paintings that have been done. They don't just have to be photographs. I've seen projects like this that make replicas. I'm sure many of you have. So anyway, before I run out of time, let me go through the rest of this question. Secondly, he says, we can't eliminate social stratification. We simply like some kinds of people less and more than others, and group formation and elitism is inevitable. Okay, I'll stop you there. Secondly, we can't eliminate social stratification. Well, what social stratification are you talking about? Human society can be infinitely stratified in multiple ways. Instead of stratification, let's think about it in the form of general hierarchy. Hierarchy in the sense of skills, for example. So you have a guy he's the lowest paid employee of a corporation, absolute bottom rung, works, say, the mail office in the basement. But during the weekends, when he's not working, he might be the best softball player in his entire community. So he's at the lowest form of stratification in his business environment, yet he's at the highest form of stratification in his community in a specific area. I hope you see the point. It's completely flexible. There's too many attributes. That's why people say it's human nature to be stratified. That's not true. We're stratified in so many different ways, not to mention 90% of society has been non-stratified and egalitarian, so make sure you remind people of that as well. We do know that almost definitively through the modern hunter-gatherer societies that exist today. So you say that we simply like some kinds of people and more and less than others, and group formation elitism is inevitable. Well, I mean, we have families. I suppose you can consider a family a form of elitism, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has a negative connotation built into it. Any group identification can be positive and negative. It has social capital on one side, meaning you have people working together, but if they have a propensity to divide themselves from other groups in a biased way, then you have a problem. Hence the nature of the military. You have all of these young people that are working together very diligently towards the goal of fighting against another group, non-cooperating against another group. A very, very disappointing scenario. So, but the point you make, group favoritism, elitism is inevitable. I don't think you understand what you're actually asking, because social stratification does not have to be monetary. And if you eliminate the monetary stratification, then the great majority of the biases that people have, the reasoning behind this class segregation begins to diminish. And I think historically speaking, there is a natural evolution of the necessity for equality amongst all groups and persons. We've developed this value, and it's been moving forward from Gandhi to Martin Luther King, you name it. And I think the next level of this civil liberties, if you will, the next level of this equality movement is to get rid of the classes. And I think it's really inevitable. And that's another reason why it becomes so important to consider what we talk about, because the imbalances that are created are really perpetuated by the system more than anything else. Okay, I'm running out of time. They continue. There would also have to be laws unless specific education is mandatory. Again, I don't even know what you mean by that statement. Laws are contingent upon problems that we can't solve in a technical formation, coupled with value systems that are set. Again, education, not mandatory. Value systems are very obvious when it comes to cooperation. If people grow up in an environment where they are cooperative, and that, of course, as we know, that is the most productive state you can be in, then there's a less propensity for conflict. I can see your point on education, but it's certainly not mandatory in the sense that you describe. As far as laws themselves, and again, I'm running out of time, laws themselves will be diminished constantly because we'll be solving social problems. And again, the economic structure, you remove the motivation for profit and money, and you give people what they need, 95% of most laws are gone. If there are a few laws in the transition as we move forward, well, let's just think about it in a relationship sense. We always work to solve those problems, but in a relative sense, if we could eliminate 90% of the laws, and wouldn't that just be unbelievable? So think about it in that sense. It's not that one day you wake up and there's no laws, but there are reasoning for the laws, and we try to work to solve those problems rather than just simply have the law and think that that's the end-all. All laws can be phased out if the social root is found. It's simply finding it and having the interest to do so, which isn't the case. People use politics. Politics uses crime for its benefit. They want crime, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, I have 19 seconds left. I'm not going to play any outro music, but I apologize for not getting more than this, and I apologize for the shorter episode. I have a bunch I have to do today to get myself back in order. And I really appreciate everybody out there, and I'll talk to you all very soon.